Abrams. Abrams. Alden.
Here.
Colross. Heel.
Here.
Oh, sorry. Heel.
Here.
Calgen.
Here.
And Quint. Hosake.
Here. Okay, before we begin, we do have one item to add to the agenda. Between item 5 and item 6, we'll be adding a opportunity for committee comment for those who are new to the dais. The thought is that this is a chance for you to bring up items that are not otherwise on the agenda, obviously not action items, but just things that you think should be shared with the committee. So, and if you have nothing today, we understand you're new to the dais, that's fine, but it is something we try to have at every agenda, it just got omitted on this time. With that, Mr. Hall, I think we're ready to move into the presentation, which will be Assistant City Attorney Dylan Brady on the Brown Act.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, one quick item before we hear the Brown Act training presentation is the oath of office for all our new members here on the committee. You know, we're very glad to have 4 new members of the committee joining us. Always exciting to have new faces here. The new members joining us are Patty Colross, Helen Heel, Frank Quince. Hello, Mr. Quince. Hello. And then Gail Abrams, who looks like is not here with us today. So I have a brief script that I'll read, and I believe every member should probably recite this, not just the new members. And then what we do is we have a brief sheet everyone will sign afterwards. But if everyone wouldn't mind holding up their right hand and repeating after me, and I'll administer the oath here. I state your name, do solemnly swear.
I, Dave Alden, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
And
and the Constitution of the State of California,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
the
Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the
Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I may take this obligation freely,
that I may take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties
upon which
I'm about.
All right, and that is it. Everyone is now sworn in. A bit of a long one there, but thank you for bearing with us.
And I apologize for having skipped over that one. Thanks,
No
Mr.
problem
Hall,
at all.
for catching me.
So yeah, with that, I believe we are ready for Dylan to give us a Brown Act training.
Thanks, Jared. And I don't have the link to this meeting. Maybe do you want to run it or?
I think,
Yeah, not yet. Is that okay, Ray? Cool. And I'll just say, so this is, and hopefully everybody has a copy, but let me know. So this is hopefully a refresher on the Brown Act for a lot of you. Always good to know. There has been some recent amendments. If there's any questions, please let me know, and feel free to just raise your hand. For the people that I can't see, I apologize. Just feel free to shout and I'll get to you. There's not going to be a test at the end of this, so you're okay there. And when I do these presentations, it's okay if you might have questions later that come up. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night with sweats and go, oh, did I violate the Brown Act a couple months ago? Feel free to just shoot me an email. My contact email and phone number is at the very end of the PowerPoint. But again, I'm Dylan Brady, Assistant City Attorney. So once we get that up, we can begin. I call this a transparency training. We will focus mainly on the Brown Act and then just brief discussions on the Public Records Act as well as the conflict of interest codes. And really the theme of this presentation and training is that transparency is good for democracy. Knowing what your public officials are doing, being informed, that is necessary and good. So let me talk about the Brown Act a little bit. Okay, it's coming up here. But the second slide will be a picture of Ralph M. Brown. He was the state senator who created and really was the main author of the Brown Act. And his reasoning for creating it was that people would vote one way in public, and then you can picture it, a dark, smoky room with cigars, the men in the back, they would vote a completely different way out of the public. So Ralph M. Brown had enough of this. He was a judge before he became working for the state assembly. And he authored this bill in 1953. Okay, cool. It's showing up. So that's a picture of him on the next one, right? Oh, cool. And I'll just really read the preamble because I think it gets at the heart of the Brown Act. And this will be the only time hopefully I read to you guys here. But the people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. Then the people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. So that's really the heart of the Brown Act. It was enacted, like I said, in 1953. It's evolved some over the years, but that really preamble has stayed pretty true. So next slide, please, Ray. And this is really what we'll be discussing in the Brown Act. It's all meetings, and we'll have to define what meetings are of the legislative body. They need to be open and public. So that's what the Brown Act is. I highlighted the meetings, legislative body, open and public, and that's what we will discuss here. So next slide, please, Ray. So briefly, topics: what's a meeting? What's a legislative body? What rules apply to meetings? What does it mean to be open and public? And then just what are the potential violations and what are the remedies for Brown Act violations? So next slide. Who is subject to the Brown Act? Well, that is legislative bodies, and now we'll need to figure out what legislative bodies are. They're obviously city council, but they are also, you don't have to be elected, you can be appointed. So that is our boards and commissions. That is you all right here. And thank you for your service, I should say as well. So boards and commissions, city councils, as well as standing committees. So standing committees, there's two different types of subcommittees. There's standing committees, and then there's ad hoc committees. Standing committees do need to comply with the Brown Act. Ad hoc committees don't. So what is the difference between a standing committee and an ad hoc committee? Standing committees are those committees that have continuous jurisdiction. So let's say if city council had a separate body with less than a quorum of their members that were just in charge of budgeting or employee discipline, maybe city morale, something like that, where it's a continuous jurisdiction, they would be considered a standing committee and they would need to comply with the Brown Act, as opposed to an ad hoc committee where they only have a temporary purpose. It's to figure something out, solve something, and as soon as they do, that body is dissolved. So let's give an instance. The HCPC, our Historical Cultural Planning Commission, they have an ad hoc committee to amend their enabling legislation or part of their zoning code. So they create an ad hoc committee. It is less than a quorum. A quorum is the majority of the body. They are tasked with amending the code. As soon as they amend the code, they'll bring it back to the larger body to discuss, potentially adopt, recommend for city council, and then they will dissolve. So ad hoc committees don't need to comply with the Brown Act. That's so they can act faster and quicker and be a little more flexible. So that are those are legislative bodies. The next, so legislative bodies, they need to comply with the Brown Act when they conduct meetings. The next slide, Ray, please. So now we need to figure out what is a meeting. A meeting has 4 elements. It needs to be a majority of the body, so that's a quorum. The Transit Advisory Committee, it looks like there's 7, so a quorum. Jared's right. That was quick, Jared. Good math. So that is more than 4. So a majority of the body, that's the first element, collectively at the same time and place. And this collectively at the same time and place has evolved over the years with technology. So it includes emails, phone calls, text messages, SharePoints on your computer. So even if you are texting a majority of the body all in a group thread, and you might be miles and miles away, under the Brown Act, that has been analyzed to be collectively at the same place and time. So I always recommend if you shoot emails, when we email in our office to City Council, I recommend BCCing them. That way there's no concern of one council member or other commissioner replying to the group, because then you are potentially in a meeting if the other 2 elements are met. And those elements are hearing, discussing, deliberating, and taking action. And then with the 4th element, within subject matter, your subject matter jurisdiction. So a majority of the body, they might be able to text about, hey, I think the Giants are going to the pennant this year. We got a good pitching staff. That's fine. That's not really in the subject matter jurisdiction. But if you do start texting or emailing items that are transit related, well, then that's a meeting and you need to comply with the Brown Act. So now we know what is a meeting. Now we'll need to figure out what is not a meeting. And there are actually 6 exceptions explicitly stated in the Brown Act. And really the key here is that it's less than a quorum, the majority. So individual contacts, one member talking to another member, that is fine. We will talk a little bit in the couple slides about serial meetings, but the key here is individual contacts. Those are less than a majority of quorum. That's not considered a meeting. Conferences and seminars is the next exception. And under the Brown Act, those conferences and meetings need to be open and for the public, and they need to be related to the general interests. So majority of the council or the committee, they can attend those. I always caution, maybe you don't want to sit next to each other just for optics. People might say, oh, what are they talking about? I heard whispering. They're talking about items within their subject matter jurisdiction. That's a meeting, and I should be present and be able to get my say. So conferences and seminars, a majority of the a quorum can participate. The key there is worry about optics and just really speak about items that are scheduled on the conference and seminar. And that way there is no concern. The next exception is community meetings. They also need to be open and public. So HOA meetings, those aren't really agendized and publicized, but it's okay if you are in attendance, just there to listen. I always recommend too, and I don't think I discuss it, but there is a concern about potential bias and conflicts. If you are attending those meetings and you are saying, okay, I'm going to vote one way or the other without it being at a meeting, because really the public should be able to weigh in, give their opinions, and hopefully they can sway a committee member yay or nay on an item. So for community meetings, you can attend. I always recommend just saying, hey, thank you for the punch and cookies. I haven't decided yet. I'll wait till the public meeting and hearing all the potential public comments, staff comments, applicant comments before weighing in on deciding. So the next exception is social events. So you are able to attend, go to Crooked Goat, with a majority of the members. But again, worry about optics. Don't discuss items within your subject matter purview. There was actually a case out in Stanislaus County where the county commissioners, before every county commission, they would have lunch together. And they were sued, I think, by the local paper for the concern about I'm sure it was on the up and up, but they were worried about, hey, what are they talking about? And then they're going right into these meetings. They could be deliberating and discussing. So the county put a memo and said these meetings will no longer happen, those luncheons. So just be careful there. But technically, social events are okay. And again, just really the key here, don't talk about items within your subject matter jurisdiction. And then the other two exceptions are meetings of other bodies in your agency and those subcommittee meetings. For subcommittee meetings, you aren't able to talk because remember, subcommittees, they are less than a majority of the people discussing, deliberating on whatever their task is. But then if you have another member that's in attendance, maybe you get to a quorum, then that becomes a meeting of the actual larger body, and that needs to be agendized. So when you attend subcommittee meetings, please don't speak. Jared, do you guys have subcommittee meetings or?
We don't. We do have one subcommittee that was dissolved for bike share. We do have an ad hoc group.
Okay, cool.
That we will be discussing today and probably forming.
Okay, awesome. And my recommendation is totally cool to create subcommittee meetings. Maybe talk to Jared and legal before doing that, and we can figure out, whether it should be a standing committee, ad hoc committee, and just set you guys up for success. And then the other exception are meetings of the governing body or other, so you're able to attend city council meetings, planning commission meetings. Maybe don't sit as a quorum because then it looks like maybe you're talking about items. Really, the recommendation there is just to speak to items that are on the agenda, and then there's no concern about optics. So those are the exceptions to meetings. And I mentioned serial meetings. Serial meetings are really when they're illegal, and they have two. Would it be possible, Ray, to go to the next slide? Thanks. There's two different types of serial meetings. There's daisy chain and hubcap. And I realize this picture doesn't show the best example of daisy chain, but that's on the left. It's when committee member A talks to committee member B about how they're going to vote or topics. Committee member B then talks to committee member C and mentions, oh, committee member A is going to vote this way. I'm going to vote this way. Committee member C talks to committee member D. Well, there you have four people talking about how each other people are going to vote. That's a majority or quorum. That is a meeting, and that needs to be agendized for the Brown Act. So that is a daisy chain serial meeting, and that's a no-go. It doesn't have to be, it can be text message, phone message, email. And then there's a hubcap, and that's either, you see the person in the middle, that could be a committee member, that could be members of staff, and it's committee member talking to staff saying, I'm going to vote this way. So the staff then talks to committee member B and says, we're going to vote, or A is going to vote this way. And then so on down the hubcap, and you get to a majority, and that is illegal. So again, the recommendation there, just BCC, or if you go to the next slide, a little recommendation is informational meetings are okay as long as they're kind of one way. So totally cool. If you have any question on the staff report, say, Jared, I have a question on this. As long as Jared is providing informational, that is okay. But if Jared is saying, oh, committee member B had the same problem and he's going to vote this way, then we have issues. And it's totally okay to ask questions. That's preferred. And what we like to do for city council, we then post them, provide them BCC to all the city council members, and then post them as well to the agenda. That way the public knows, hey, unless it's attorney-client privilege and legal issues, we wouldn't do that. But if it's general topics and questions that council members may have, then we provide those to the public because they may have those questions too, and it better explains the staff report. So that's totally okay. And then the next slide, great. So there are special types of meetings. Most of them are regular meetings. They are in person. There are called teleconference meetings, and this is what you guys did during COVID. And they actually, so before COVID, under the Brown Act, to have teleconference meetings, you need to have a majority here at City Hall, council chambers, or wherever the meetings take place. And then a couple members, as long as it's not a majority, can attend remotely. But to do so, they need to have the agenda needs to say where they're participating from, the address. That address needs to be, or the agenda with the address needs to be posted at their location. And the committee member needs to open their doors for the public to participate where they are. So it's pretty onerous. And, you know, a lot of the times you might be participating in your home. You probably don't want the public in your home with you. Maybe you're on vacation. So that was prior to COVID. With COVID, they relaxed those rules and they said in state of emergencies, if the city council makes certain findings, you can have teleconference meetings where you don't have to be or a majority don't have to be at the same place, and you don't have to invite the public in with you, and which is good because during COVID, if you are sick, that's contagious and that would be potentially spread the virus. So what they also did is in 2022 with this assembly bill, they relaxed the teleconferencing rules where if you have what's called a just cause or an emergency, you are able to participate remotely. And Jared, I believe somebody in TAC did this a couple months ago, right? Yeah. Okay, awesome. So it does work. So that's great. I'm sure the legislature is happy to hear that. But to have a just cause, it needs to be sick and contagious, or childcare wasn't able to make it. I need to take care of my family member, dad, mom, grandma, grandpa. You are then able to participate remotely, and you don't have to post the agenda at your location. You don't have to say where you are. You do, though, have to have your screen on at all times. And before you discuss and deliberate on items, say who in the room is with you above the age of 18. So kind of onerous, but it is a relaxation. It is a new rule, and thought it would be good to let everyone know that that's a potential option. Emergencies aren't really defined under this law statute, but if you have an emergency, I don't know, my car broke down, then you tell Jared as soon as you can. Jared informs the group. That is the first item that you do is you vote on whether or not that is an emergency to constitute that member participating remotely. So I don't know how the utility there or beneficial that rule is, but it is an exception and just wanted to let everyone know. So that is kind of the... we talked about the different, what's that? There is, that's a good question too. You are only able to do that 20% of the time. So let's say real easy math for me. If you have 10 meetings a year, you can only have a just cause or emergency 2 times in a calendar year. So not the most helpful rule, but it is a relaxation of allowing the public to attend with you. Okay, so now let's kind of talk about what open and public means for the Brown Act. So there are different types of meetings. This meeting and most of your meetings, I would assume, for other CCBs are considered regular meetings. The other types are special or emergency meetings. You might have closed session meetings, but for TAC and every other committee, I believe regular meetings. So those are occur at the enabling legislations, the date, the time, the agenda, there needs to be posted 72 hours in advance. The agenda descriptions need to be brief, but also allow and have an accurate description so members of the public, they can see and decide whether or not they want to attend and participate in the meeting in that item. For an example, let's say council members a couple months ago voted on Scott Ranch. As part of that decision, there was the EIR for the CEQA document for Scott Ranch, as well as a final map, I think a general plan amendment, maybe a zoning code amendment. So that was all in the description of what council would be doing that night. And that was perfectly fine because that allows a member of the public to say, oh, I want to participate and weigh in on whether or not council should certify the CEQA document. as opposed to, let's say, the agenda description just said Scott Ranch. Well, that really doesn't provide much description of what the topic is going to be. So that is not a accurate description of the item, and it would be a Brown Act violation. And that's mostly for staff here, but just wanted to let you know. And those agendas, they need to be freely accessible. So we post all of our agendas 72 hours in advance outside in the doors. So we also do it online as well to make it ease of access. But there was a case last year, and I forget the jurisdiction. They only posted their agendas online, and they found, well, all the people might not have access to the internet, and they really need to be available in a location for the public. So they are outside of our city hall doors there, so you don't have to come in. You can come in Saturdays after hours and see what the agendas are. For non-agendized items, you really shouldn't be discussing those, but like everything, there are exceptions. Ray, would you mind going to the next slide, please? Those exceptions are listed here. And I will give a quick example. Last Monday night, City Council voted to amend our mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. And as part of that discussion, there was quite a few public comments on adding a senior overlay district, which we weren't able to discuss or do that night because adding a senior overlay district wasn't on the Brown Act description or the agenda description. It was only amending the mobile home rent stabilization, but we are able to answer brief questions. If Jared, in his discussion later on, mentions, there's going to be this meeting or, event, totally okay to ask questions on that. When's the date? When's the time? And there's really no real guidance or analysis yet in case law, and hopefully we're not the guinea pigs to figure that out. But somewhere along the line, it becomes a brief response, clarifications to a full-on discussing deliberation on that item. And wherever it crosses that line, it needs to be agendized. So, but there's no harm in saying, hey, Jared, I would like to bring this item for a future agenda. And then it's agendized, then the public can go out City Hall, see what the agenda is, and if they want to participate and weigh in. And then, so that's what the agendas look like. And then public participation is next. Next slide. So this is part of the open and public. There's really two parts in every agenda meeting or every meeting where the public is able to speak. That's a general public comment period. Typically, we have it at the beginning. It is for non-agendized items that are within the subject matter purview. So if you had somebody in the public today that came out to TAC during the public comment period and started saying, boy, the Giants bullpen looks good. These rookies were going all the way this year. Well, that's really not in your subject matter jurisdiction. And you could say, please, glad to hear it. We're all Giants fans, but it needs to be within the subject matter jurisdiction. And then the other part of the matter where the public can speak are for during those specific agenda items, either before or during discussion and deliberation. Freedom of speech, that's why we have it. Criticism is okay. The public is able to weigh in and they might say, oh, staff, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe the council voted that way. That's okay. A couple rules of decorum is next. You'll see on our agenda, its descriptions, it has a brief rules of decorum. That is really yelling when you're not supposed to, speaking over your allotted time, and it's really to make sure the meeting continues. So other items, rules and decorums, I have speaker cards. The public doesn't need to give their exact name if they don't want to. I have time limits here. Typically, it's 3 minutes, right, Jared? Yeah. The 3 minutes, that's kind of standard. But if it was a busy meeting and there's a lot of the public here, you can go down with a vote, say, let's go down to 2 minutes to facilitate the meeting and make sure we all get out at a reasonable hour, or you just have to have a justifications to lower the time limits. Hey, this is the fourth time we have talked about this issue, so we are going to bring this to 2 minutes. And then the public's able to record on their own, take pictures. That's totally cool. There is a recent law about removing disruptive citizens. This is for the chair here, and we have a script that we can provide all the CCBs. But it allows let's say you have a disruptive citizen, they're yelling, making sure you aren't able to have your meeting effectively. You are then supposed to warn the person, say why the justification for the warning. Hey, you're talking over your 3 minutes, you're yelling, you're swearing, whatever. If you continue to act that way, you will be asked to be removed. My recommendation, and hopefully it doesn't happen, and I haven't seen it happen, so that's good, is call a brief recess. Hopefully that calms the tensions down. During that recess, let us know and let PPD know, and then we can come and advise and potentially remove that person. But hopefully that doesn't happen. And then the next slide talks about enforcement and the consequences. There are potential criminal and civil violations for the city here, but I have not seen the criminal in my 8 years of working for public agencies. So I think it's rare. I think you really have to be willfully violating the Brown Act, but it is potential misdemeanor offense. So I just wanted to caution everyone that that is potentially an issue. And so let's say the agenda description on Scott Ranch, somebody says, well, city, I don't feel that was an accurate description. You voted for X, Y, and Z. That wasn't on the description. They would need to complain to the city, send a letter within 30 days of that action. And then the city, we would weigh in legal and say, oh, they are right. And all we have to do is then put the item back on for the next meeting to cure it. So we should never try to violate the Brown Act. But if we do, it's not the worst thing to happen. You just bring the item back again. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about the Brown Act. I do have a great resource here. It's the League of California Cities. They have a whole Brown Act guide. If you ask me a question and I don't know it, Eric doesn't know it, Eric's the city attorney, this will be the first place that we look. So, and like I said, feel free if you have a question that comes up whenever, let us know. Happy to answer. And then just very briefly, I want to talk about the Public Records Act. You all, as public officials, are subject to the Public Records Act. I see if you are able to, somebody from the public calls you, emails you, and says, hey, I want these documents, all your emails, let us know, staff know, and then we can calendar it and help you go through and gather those public records, review them. Public records are the only thing subject to the Public Record Act. A public record is a document that is related to the conduct of the people's business. So text messages or your grocery lists, text messages to your brother, significant other about what we're doing this weekend, that's not related to the public's business. The public doesn't get that under a Public Records Act. And we can help you with those. And then this I should brief down. This was a case that said, your personal devices, even though if you don't have a city cell phone, a city email account, if you are using your personal devices, your AOL account, Gmail account to do city business on them, they are subject to the Public Records Act. So recommendation here is just when you write emails, text messages, documents about the city business, just know that they potentially could be disclosable, and just kind of write those emails and texts knowing your mom's behind you and you're not going to swear or do anything too embarrassing. So that's my recommendation there. And then the next, real briefly, is conflicts of interest. And there's quite a few different types of conflicts of interest. But the main one, and I'll say too, the justification for conflicts of interest is that the public should know that you are making decisions. You're a fiduciary for the public. You are making those decisions out of the public's best interest and not for your own pecuniary gain. It's to avoid temptation and really the optics of impropriety. So here is kind of the basic prohibition for conflicts. It's that you should not be participating in potential decisions, contracts, votes, where you, your significant other, your close family member may have a material financial interest. And can we skip maybe 2 slides, Ray, please? So here are kind of, maybe the next one prior, sorry, Ray. Yep, there we go. And this is hard to see. But these are really the main types of financial interests you may have. If you are investing in a business, if you are a employee of the planning commissioner, let's say you are employee for the developer, well, you shouldn't be voting on that because the public might not know if you're voting in their favor. If you are voting on an item that you are within own property or rent property and you're within 1,000 feet, well, that decision may impact the value of your property. So the takeaway here is if you have potential, you see the agenda and it's an item where, maybe I shouldn't be participating in, let us know and we can do the analysis and help you out. If we decide that you do have a financial interest, all you have to do is say, hey, I talked to the city attorney's office. They advised me that I shouldn't participate because I live within X amount of feet of this decision, so I will be recusing myself. So that's how to get out of there. Yeah, please, Peter.
So quick question about that is you said if you own or rent, then you have a financial interest. Is that
Yeah, so it is both
even if
owning
you're-
and renting.
even if
Yeah.
you're a renter?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's the same analysis. And those factors really are, I'll just kind of briefly touch on it. So if you are within 500 feet of that decision, there is a strong presumption that you do have a material financial interest, regardless of whether you own or rent. If it's within 500, 1,000 feet, there are certain factors that you look at, and those factors are how does the decision impact the best use of the property? Does it affect traffic, parking? So even though you might not own the property, that decision might affect your parking, traffic, noise, air quality. So that is the analysis there. But good question. And really, I think that is just recusal. And then, Ray, I'll just, real quickly, there's this doctrine called the doctrine of incompatibility of offices. That is when you are a member of one committee and maybe you are a committee somewhere else for another jurisdiction that has overlapping territory, let's say a school board. You might have interests that kind of align and overlap, and the public doesn't know, are you deciding as a member of the TAC here, or are you deciding as a member of the Planning Commission for the county? So there's a couple analysis that we do. If you are thinking of joining another office, great. The more service, the better. Just let us know before then. Because if you do have an incompatibility of office, you are automatically by law terminate and resign from that first office, which we don't want to happen. So just before you think of deciding to join another office, let staff know and we can help you and advise there. So that's really my whole presentation.
That's for
Peter, please.
boards, committees, and commissions, right?
Yeah, so that is a good question. One of the exceptions to the incompatibility of offices is there a statute that allows members to be on 2 different ones? So we have Councilmember Posake here. Obviously, Councilmember Posake is a council member. The TAC enabling legislation explicitly allows one member of city council to join this commission. And that is how we get around that. So any other questions? So there is my contact information. Thanks for indulging me here. Like I said, if you are concerned, maybe I'm violating the Brown Act, please let us know. I get why maybe people don't want to say it in the public, even though there's not too many people here. Happy to answer any questions. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Brady.
Thank you.
Before going on to the approval of minutes, I should acknowledge that I'm apparently having a bad agenda day. We should have done general public comment before that presentation. Given the fact that the chambers are empty, I think we can safely say there wouldn't have been any, but I apologize, and we'll try to do better next month. On to approval of minutes. Mr. Hall, I have a question. We only have 3 members here who were at the last meeting, and we're never going to have any more than the 3 because everyone else has left office. Do we still just proceed with minute approval?
I can help answer that one. Yeah.
I brought it up quickly in case you wanted to jump back in.
I'll be here for a couple more, an hour or so too, if any more questions come up. I don't know if this is working, green, but I'll speak loudly. So that is okay. The minutes are, we get that all the time, especially with new members. The minutes are a reflection of the previous agenda. So potentially new members are able to look at the past meeting and say, okay, this is an accurate reflection of the events that occurred. So totally okay, but I get maybe you want to continue it for the next time to allow the new members to potentially rewatch these video, make sure that all the actions are reflected in the minutes. So totally okay to vote tonight or continue it for later tonight.
And as long as you're still here, let me ask one other question. Do I understand the current practice for agenda approval is for no further comments or corrections, and then a motion and a second, but no vote?
That's a good question. I think with the minutes, it's pretty much just a straw poll. Is everybody okay with how we do this? If there's no objections, say, okay, the minutes are approved, and I think that's totally cool.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me know if there's any other questions, and thanks for having me.
So then I pose the question to the 3 new members. Would you prefer to hold on approving last month's minutes until you've had a chance to review the film, or can we proceed with approval this evening? Okay, I'm seeing mostly nods. So for the 3 people who were here at the last meeting, are there any corrections to the minutes?
No, I'll make the motion.
I think we just heard no motions required. So, okay, hearing no comments, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Mr. Hall, we're on to appointment of officers. That's yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, we're very fortunate to have the new members joining us today. So that brings us to the thing that we do annually, which is the appointment of our cabinet positions here for the TAC. We always do this for the first committee meeting that follows the appointment of the positions that was done recently by City Council. And so today we're looking to fill 2 positions along with a ad hoc group that I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. The 2 positions that we're looking to appoint are the chair position and the vice chair. The chair, of course, presides over the meetings, as Mr. Alden is doing. Generally determines kind of the speed of them, reads through the agenda, takes comment and questions, things along those lines. And then the vice chair, the primary duties are just the backup to the chair. In their absence, they then would chair the meetings. And so these would be 1-year positions. We would like, nominations for them, and then see the people who are nominated accept, and then we can vote on them if we have more than one person. And then the final piece is that we have a ad hoc committee that will be forming. Although it talks about in the packet microtransit specifically, that'll be one of really kind of 2 things that we anticipate it addresses. One being microtransit or shuttle service, that being a new type of service that we're looking to offer in the upcoming fiscal year. We'll go into it in more detail at a later time, but generally it's a new type of demand responsive service that people could use a smartphone with, for example, to be able to summon it, kind of similar to Uber, Lyft, mixed with paratransit. And so we want to work with members of this ad hoc group to help provide more guidance on that, since it's a new service. What does it look like? How is it structured? What's the name of it? Where does it go? Things along those lines. And so we'd like, I believe we can have up to 3 members of that before, again, we potentially run into something that would be a Brown Act violation, as we just heard from Mr. Danley. And so that, of course, is voluntary. And that being an ad hoc, it would be non-agendized, temporary duration to be determined, but not a permanent ongoing one with that group as well. And so we'd also love to hear from people if they have any interest in serving on that committee as well. And with that, Mr. Chair, happy to turn it back to you.
I appreciate that, but can I follow up with one question to you? You said that the ad hoc committee had potentially 2 tasks, but maybe I missed one. I heard micromobility. What was the other one in your mind?
Yes, I'm not very good at counting myself too. So the first one would be the microtransit, and then the second one would be a TNC partnership. TNC being transportation network companies, also similar to Uber, Lyft, taxi companies. We'd like to launch a pilot program working with them, which has kind of a subsidy type program to make those more available. And actually, why don't I pass it off, if she's interested, to Maria to see if she's interested in talking a bit more about the microtransit or the TNC programs.
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions about the TNC or the microtransit program, but the ad hoc will just be an opportunity to kind of give us some direction in terms, there's a lot of decision-making points with microtransit specifically and where we're going to offer it, who we're trying to meet, what pain points in the community we're trying to address. So, but it's also a lot of fun because it's a new, unique service as well as TNCs, and just giving more opportunity for the community to have many ways to get around Petaluma. So happy to answer questions about it.
Yeah, so overall, although they're kind of 2 separate items, they're very closely related. They'll both be new offerings. I think they will probably work closely together and help provide new services or maybe fill in gaps of services that we have now. Say, for example, maybe late night service, after our service stops running at about 8:30 p.m. Or maybe it's on weekends, or maybe certain parts of the city. Those are all the different kinds of things we'll be considering discussing amongst these groups.
Okay.
So that would be the second one.
Okay, and then if I could offer 2 more possible areas of study. I think you and I have talked before about the free fare program and the possible involvement of formulating what free fares look like. And I'm not trying to overload that ad hoc committee, nor am I trying to bypass this committee. I just find that sometimes these topics are sufficiently complex that having a 3-person conversation that we then bring forth to the full committee can be effective. So free fares would be my number 3. And then my 4th, I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with the planning manager regarding the rather controversial proposed downtown overlay. And they want to start having a conversation about how transportation works with the additional development that may occur in that overlay. And they were interested in interacting with this body regarding transit. I'm sorry, Mr. Calgin?
So on that, just a quick, that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss in my comments was with all the new growth that's been going on with additional housing and additional hotels, if we did any sort of growth analysis with that, and if we're thinking about offering different services and stuff like that. So I think that dovetails nicely into that conversation. So I don't know if that necessarily goes under the purview of this subcommittee, but
I don't know either. I think I don't want that subcommittee to become so huge. It becomes, or have such a huge scope, it becomes overwhelmed. But I think that does belong on the table. I'd agree with you. Perhaps what we do today is just appoint a microtransit subcommittee, ad hoc microtransit committee. Thank you. And then we continue to discuss exactly what the scope of that committee is. But those are my 2 additional.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great feedback. We'll discuss that more as staff, not just amongst the staff, but other city staff as well. I would say of those 2, the fare free, we've definitely discussed, started discussions, actually given some thought already to how we involve this group if we do an ad hoc, something along those lines. So more to come. We'll be discussing on that at a future meeting for sure.
Okay. So now it's back to me to conduct the election and appointment process. Let's start by trying to nominate both a chair and a vice chair. In the past, it's generally worked out there's only one person for each, and we can virtually approve by acclamation. But do I hear any nominations for someone to be the chair? Mr. Posake? Oh, you're waiting for someone else to speak up? Yeah. Someone?
I was interested in co-chair, but if the gavel needs to move from you, then I would be interested.
There's no requirement for the gavel to move. I can stay if that's your preference. Okay.
I'll agree with what you guys I think just decided. Nominate Dave for chair and Peter for vice chair.
Ms. Colross. What's that? I think be vice, yeah.
I agree with Dr. Posake. Nominate Dave Alden for chair and Peter for co-chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further nominations? Okay, then I think we do need to have a roll call vote.
Alden,
Yes.
Kulras. Yes. Keel,
Yes.
Calgen,
Yes.
Quint,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate your continuing trust. I'll try to earn it and do a better job with the agenda. Okay, now on to the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee really was sort of named last year, and Peter and I were the two members. I forget who number 3 was, but he is no longer with us. It was probably Mr. Chisholm. I'm willing to continue. Peter, are you, okay. Let me see, I probably shouldn't run it quite that way. Who would like to be on that ad hoc committee?
I would.
Yeah, I figured you and I were already there, but who else would like to join that committee? Mr. Posake, I'd love to have you, but you have a full plate.
I want to defer to anyone else who wants to be on it because there's only 3, right?
Correct.
I'm happy to be the
You would be willing to be the third?
Yes.
Okay, I normally try to give a lot of leeway to council members because of your full plate, but of the 3 new members, would anybody really want to be on that committee? I'm not seeing any enthusiasm, so it would appear the committee will be Mr. Calgen, Mr. Posake, Councilmember Posake, and me. Do we need to have a vote on that? Okay?
No, that's an informal item, so no vote needed.
Okay. The advantage of being ad hoc, right?
Correct, exactly.
Okay.
And then one piece worth noting too, I skipped over in the agenda. I touched on it earlier, but we did previously have a subcommittee of bike share between this group and the PBAC, the Pedestrian Bike Advisory Committee. Due to the nature of that project, as people may know the history, we were pretty far down the path. The vendor that had been selected, working with multiple jurisdictions up and down the SMART train corridor, ended up going out of business nationwide. So it was a bit back to the drawing board on that. Fortunately, SCTA just reissued the request for proposals last month. And so that project is now moving again. I will say that all the work that this group, PBAC, and the subcommittee, the 2 has done is still very much relevant, I feel, in terms of where we'd like to see those stations, all those things. We'll, of course, revisit that. But the thought was that group will no longer continue since it was disrupted for so long and so many meetings on the calendar canceled. We will handle that business separately at each meeting. So you'll hear about it both here at TAC and then also PBAC as well.
Okay. And actually, 2 other notes I had. I know the Climate Action Commission has appointed ad hoc committees that include members that are not on the commission, just members of the public, to bring their additional expertise in. Is that an option for our ad hoc committee?
I would say, yeah, it is. I mean, maybe when we form the first meeting of that group, we can talk about that. What is the ideal composition? Would it make sense to potentially have other people involved as well?
Okay, if you can make sure to bring that forward, I'd appreciate that. And then also, I think under this agenda item, you included a discussion of meeting times.
Yes. So also another great point. This is kind of the best time every year, usually when we discuss the meeting times to see if it's ideal for everyone. Of course, right now we meet the second Thursday of the month here in council chambers at 4 p.m. But we always like to get feedback from the public, of course. So not much feedback today, unfortunately, but from the members of the committee here as well. If that meeting time still makes the most sense, or if another time or day would be preferred.
I think, Ms. Colruss, you probably brought this issue forward because of your schedule. Can you advise?
I'm a professor at Dominican University of California, and in the spring, my teaching schedule perhaps will conflict. I have a class scheduled to end at 3:40 p.m. in San Rafael. it is possible I can move the class up an hour so that I can get here. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I just thought that I needed to tell people that that is a possible scheduling conflict for the spring. For the fall, I'm fine. I can make it here at 4.
Okay. Do we hear any other concerns about the second Tuesday at 4 o'clock time?
If we could push it back to 4:30, that'd be ideal.
The reason we have been at 4 is we encourage transit riders to be here. And if we meet at 4:30 and go on it all along, I don't know if the transit schedule still allows them to get home. Would that be an issue?
I think that we could do it still runs till 8:30. Although in this particular case, I would say there would be a conflict after us because the Climate Action Commission meetings start at 6 p.m. on the second Thursdays. As you may recall, we were originally on the first Thursday of the month, but we had a meeting that was butting up against us, running too close to where we regularly had conflict in case our meetings ran long. So we moved it so there's now, in case we run till 6, they start at 6:30, a minimal buffer of at least 30 minutes between the two. So I think we would probably have to look at alternative days and times to make sure there wouldn't be a conflict, kind of look at the overall calendar.
I withdraw my statement.
Well,
That's-
okay. But did you say the Climate Commission begins at 6?
I believe it's 6:30.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
this meeting generally, we have from 4 to 6 p.m. Of course, meetings don't always go that long. Sometimes they do.
Usually don't.
But theirs is at 6:30, so ideally you have at least 30 minutes.
Okay.
We can clear the room, they can set up, et cetera.
Given everything I've heard here, it sounds like holding the current time for now, and then Ms. Colruyt, when we come to spring, if you've not been able to change your class time, we can revisit it, because we certainly want to find a way for everyone to participate, so. Do I hear any objections to that? Okay, thank you. Mr. Hall, it's back to you now on the extension to the MV contract.
Thank you very much. So this item, as you may recall, about a year ago, we brought this item before TAC and also City Council, and this pertains to the MV Transportation Operations Agreements. Of course, this is the biggest line item that we have in our budget annually. The city staff for transit is relatively small, 4 staff, which is here today, and the majority of the labor force is actually contracted through MV Transportation. That includes drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, supervisors, etc. We've been contracting with MV Transportation for a number of years. Overall, since the start of Petaluma Transit in 1976, those items have been contracted out. The current contract status with MV started in 2018, and it was 4 base years along with 3 one-year options. Until last year, we executed the first of those options. The item before the committee today is requesting that we execute the next 2 of those options, of which staff would continue to monitor the performance of MV over this year, and of course only proceed if it continues to be adequate over that time frame. But overall, I would say we're in a much improved spot working with MV and with the labor force. One of the things that we did when we executed the agreement last year is we actually did an amendment to it to adjust the wages. As people may recall, the wages were really low for Petaluma, really close to the Petaluma Living Wage Ordinance, just not really competitive with other nearby transit agencies. And so what we did at that time is we did a survey of all the nearby transit agencies, the wages they're paying drivers. We worked with MV to come up with a wage scale that put us on par, at least, with other nearby transit agencies. And so at that time, as you may recall, we had 45%, I believe, vacancy rates at MV. You know, we had vacant positions, especially amongst drivers, operators, mechanics, dispatch. Right now, I'm happy to say we only have 1 vacant MV position, our second mechanic. And so we've hired several drivers over that time. We're at the point now where we're covering the full schedule, no missed trips, which is fortunate. A lot of transit agencies, that's something they've been struggling with even pre-COVID, industry-wide across the country. The labor force has been a big issue. agencies can't get enough drivers. So we're fortunate and somewhat to envy that we've kind of changed the situation and we're now fully staffed on the driver side. So not only are we now running the service that we have scheduled fully, we're able to expand and run new services, hopefully, such as the microtransit that we talked about, and even adding more service potentially on other routes, corridors, like perhaps Route 11, things along those lines. And so this has really been helpful for us because that wage adjustment, which brought the wage up from $19.25 an hour to $25.25 as a starting wage for drivers, that really was one of the big pieces that helped move the needle to help us get more drivers. And then also working closely with MV, who's really upped their performance in terms of providing dedicated sourcers, recruiters that are working on the Petaluma area. Of course, we have a great new general manager, Bill Middleton. He's out of state right now. He's out in Texas. Would have loved to have him here otherwise. But he's been doing a great job. And then also a new regional vice president, Peter Edwards, who was formerly a general manager up in Santa Rosa, so knows the area very well. So overall, I would say as an agency for city staff, we're a lot more confident at this point with the performance of MB than we were in the past. And we think that'll continue to be that way throughout the life of this agreement, both for FY24 and then for FY25 as well. In terms of the cost increases, the driver's starting wage, it goes up 5% for FY24, 5% for FY25. So we'll hopefully stay similar at market and not fall further underwater, which can also be an issue. Overall, you can see the estimated financial impacts of that here in your packets. We anticipate that the agreements would go up to $2,152,000 approximately in FY24, somewhat an estimate, of course, based on a combination of the fixed fees in the contract and then a per hour rates. So that varies somewhat depending on how much service we provide, how many hours we have. So it's a combination of the fixed and the variable piece. And then $2,260,000 is the estimate for FY25 as well. So with that, happy to open it up for any questions that you have.
Any questions? I hear a yes on my side. Mr. Calhoun?
Can you pull the mic closer?
Oh yeah, sure. So super awesome to hear that we are mostly staffed up. That's great. Do we know if we're attracting any staff members that are closer to home? I know that was one of the things that came up last time we talked about this. I know that trying to attract drivers within Sonoma County is difficult. But from this new pool, did we do any better?
I gotta say, I'm not 100% knowledgeable
Right, no, I'm sure
of
that's-
where they live specifically. I wish Bill was here, could better answer that. I can ask him the question and get you that. You are right, though, that generally is a difficulty. It seems for us, and especially more expensive parts of the Bay, the labor force is generally coming from further and further away.
Right.
In our case, maybe coming from areas like Vallejo, Fairfield. Generally, that's been the trend we've seen more and more over time. I haven't had a chance to ask specifically. I don't know if you know Maria at all.
Just anecdotally, I know we have one dispatcher who's fairly out of the area, but the rest are in the area. I've actually noticed that some of our drivers ride their bikes to work, which, is
fantastic.
phenomenal to see. I speak to we all do. We all speak to the drivers fairly often. I attend safety meetings, and they talk like they're a community member, so I get the sense that
That's
the
fantastic.
majority of them are. So.
That's great.
And I would say that's one of the pieces we've really emphasized too. It's the wage is one piece of it, but the messaging is how you do it, how you're selling the agency and the job, who you're reaching out to, where you're getting the information out. So we've really tried to emphasize the community aspect of your servant of the community. You're not just driving a bus, as some advertisements put it across the industry. You really are a customer service agent serving your community, hopefully. And I do think the drivers that I know live closer, that really is a vital piece for them, something that really is valuable.
That's great to hear. That's good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Quinn, thank you.
So Jared, can you perhaps speak for a moment on, I'm curious, not, really having been familiar with the background on it, are there mechanisms in place for measuring performance both in terms of routes and on time, and as well as financial performance, meeting budget, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so there are, and if people, want to take a look, the agreement is attached. It can be a lengthy read, but it covers a lot of the performance measures that are in there. But yes, every month there's a kind of list of different performance measures that MV provides to us. They have to track the ridership, so they're tracking things like ridership, number of service hours, on-time performance. Those are all things that they report on every month, and they have benchmarks that they have to meet. And there's also provisions in there that provide, for bonuses if they're achieving certain performance targets, or liquidated damages if those aren't be fulfilled. For example, if they're short staff, if they're missing trips, those can have liquidated damages associated with it as well. So I would say, yeah, it's actually fairly lengthy in this agreement compared to, a lot of other ones, the bonuses and LDs, liquidated damages, and kind of the performance aspects of it as well.
Okay. One question for me. I'm very happy that you're comfortable with MV and want to do both of the one-year extensions. But it seems like by doing both at this time, we're giving up a little bit of flexibility. Hopefully we don't need the flexibility, but still we're giving up something in exchange for really nothing. Is there any reason that we shouldn't just do a one-year extension now and leave the other one as an option?
It's fully in the prerogative of this group. We can do 1 year and then come back at a later time. And given how the performance was approximately a year ago, there was less confidence. We're confident now that, over the course of really kind of the next 10 months or so, given the people we have in place, that the performance will continue to be good and not have a huge drop off. But that's something we could always do. That's one of the alternatives that is identified in here as well.
Do you feel your relationship with MV would be affected if you only give them 1 year of extension compared to the 2 they might be expecting?
No, not at all.
Okay. Rather than making it a matter of vote, let me hear some thoughts from folks about 1 year or 2 years. Mr. Callaghan? Oh, was there somebody down here?
I don't feel strongly. I mean, I was happy. I mean, I might have had the same question you did, but I believe there was some verbiage in your report, Jared, that you could still renegotiate, or is that true?
Is that right?
Yes, we wouldn't. This gives staff the permission to execute the second year, but at this point, we would not sign it with MV. The city would just be signing the 1 year, and then effectively staff would be monitoring it over that time period. If performance continues to meet it at that point, the city would execute. This item is giving city the permission to execute, but it would only be a 1 year at this point. And then if everything is good performance, it would be a 1 year again for next year. It would be included in the budget process as we do every year.
I guess I'd misread it. I thought that was an option. I didn't think that was the preferred option. And I guess that still leaves me with the feeling that it takes this body out of the loop. We've given our approval, the council's given their approval. It's strictly now staff's decision on the second year. And I have complete faith in you, but I also want this committee to have some role. Any
I
other?
didn't get that. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bosque,
No, I'm
please.
just saying, no, I'm in agreement with you then. I didn't realize, I didn't read it that way in the report. Yeah.
Mr. Callaghan, I think you were going to comment?
I have a comment.
Was it you? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Heel, my apologies.
I just want to do a quick recap and see if I have this. So for a while, you weren't as confident as you wanted to be, but that seems to have been resolved. And so you're confident now with a 1 year contract, right? With a 1 year extension? That's what you're requesting? Yeah.
Yeah, at this point, basically, this item would be giving us the ability to do the 2 years, but we would only be executing the 1 year at this point. And then basically assuming performance continues at the same level and doesn't have a significant drop off, then the second year would be executed in June of 2024.
24, yeah. It just seems to me that since there's been an uneven profile on this, that it would make sense to maintain some control and maintain some input from this group this year and next year as well. Yeah.
Mr. Callaghan?
I agree that if only recently we've started feeling confident with them, then yes, 100% we should be cautious. However, I know that there was, during COVID and post-COVID, there was a lot of challenges. So I don't know that it's necessarily entirely their fault. But either way, I would agree. My other question, sort of in that same vein, is have we been asking the same amount of them? I know that we cut some routes and there's been some changes. So it's great to hear that we're having on time and all the performance indicators are being hit. That's fantastic. But are we asking the same standards of them as we were, last year, 3 years ago when we signed the contract?
Absolutely. That's one of the pieces where we've really been impressed with their improvement on it. When I mentioned the recruiting piece, that's something they did on their end. There was no additional expense, to the city. When they brought on that recruiter, they've run paid advertisements through platforms like LinkedIn, Indeed, things like that to help get more drivers on board. So yes, that's part of, I think, why we view it as performance really improved. It's both kind of from the general manager position, which is really, I would probably say, the most vital one with MV. Bill's been on board with us for maybe about 6 months or so now, and we feel doing a really good job. That's really kind of the most key position there. And then agency-wise, it's really improved as well. We feel there's a lot more presence, resources from the regional side. We're seeing the regional director of maintenance is going to be here, next month. We've had the nearby GM stopping by to help work with our new GM Bill as it gets more up to speed. So on that side, kind of the corporate organizational mechanism side too, we feel they've stepped up. Whereas before, we wanted to see them more, come by, provide more resources to the operation of the GM. They've really improved in those areas too. Those were kind of the two ones we were really looking to see improvement on. Really three, I would say improvement from the general manager position, improvement from the corporate side, MB, more resources, and then hiring and backfilling a lot of the positions. And from our point of view, all three of those have really been improved and addressed by and large.
Great. That's great to hear.
Mr. Quinn, thank you.
Would it benefit your position with MV to have the ability for us to approve both years up front? Like, would that give you, I certainly know what it's like negotiating or managing leading third-party vendors, right? And the relationship there can be challenging. And so I'm just curious if having both in your back pocket, both years in your back pocket, if that would benefit you in any way with your relationship with them.
Potentially. I mean, there's nothing ironclad tied to it contractually, but relationship-wise, I would say yes, it potentially helps to kind of show that the city is committed to it. For example, one of the recent divisions with MV closed, and I think it was a combination of agency and MV saying it doesn't really make sense for them. It really does have to be kind of a two-way street. Of course, from the city point of view, we want them to operate the contract efficiently, cost effectively, that's a piece. But it really does have to make sense from their point of view too. There's always a chance that the contract doesn't make sense for them. So nothing direct, there's no direct financial impact, I wouldn't say. There's not really a different negotiation or rate adjustment that would happen as a result. It's more of a kind of qualitative relationship thing. I think it helps to show that commitment and hopefully it helps them make sure they maintain the recruiters and the resources they put into it. But that's kind of more of a soft benefit than a tangible line item benefit.
I think I had the same question about if the level of commitment and investment from MV, if we only approve a one-year extension, what does that say about what we think of them? And subsequently, what do they think about the effort that they need to put in to maintain what they're doing for us? is it common to have city vendor contracts approved a year at a time? Or is this a special case of some sort?
I think it's really case by case in each instance. I would say there's no negative repercussions that I foresee if we did the 1 year. As mentioned in the memo, that is one of the alternatives. I don't see any negative impacts of doing that. So I think it truly is this body and their preference. If they prefer to do the 1 year now, perfectly fine, or the 2 years. I really don't think there's any negative aspects if that's the preference of this group. We did truly want to bring it before you to offer both options, A and B, what's the flavor you prefer, so.
If we only recommend the 1 year and the city council follows suit, it seems to me that where that leaves us is, well, MV will only get a 1 year extension regardless. The only difference is whether this body and the council buy off in advance, and then you're the sole decision maker on whether you give them the second year as compared to having to come back through this body and the council before the second year. And I guess I still lean toward making this body as relevant as possible. So that just, as chair, I get the way I should feel. So let's make it a straw poll before we take a motion. Like, who would prefer a single year, and who would, who would prefer only 1 year to be recommended at this time with the other deferred till a later date?
Can I
Please.
get a clarification? Because my understanding was the conversation was a 1 year extension with a particular kind of option for the second year. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, so basically, as it's written right now, this group, and I guess subsequently council, would be giving staff the approval to execute two separate 1 year agreements. At this point, it would be the 1 year agreement for FY24, and then assuming all performance measures are executed, the second one would then be executed, by staff through the city manager for FY25. So even if that's a scenario, the document signed between the city and MV would just be, at this point, the FY24 1 year extension.
And just to make it clear, perhaps for the new members, the contract with MV was originally for 5 years? With
4 base years with 3 1 options.
Okay, so a total of 7. Okay.
Correct.
So basically, right now, we're already 5 years into the deal, and the only issue now is whether we give them 6 or approval for 6 and 7 with your discretion on 7.
Correct.
Okay. Now, who favors only approving, only recommending the council approve only 1 year at this time? Okay, so you still okay? So I will, here's seeing only 2 hands raised. I will entertain a motion to recommend the council approve both 1 year extensions.
Yes. Sorry, to approve both 1 year extensions?
Yes.
Then I'll second that motion.
Well, no,
I'll
I
make
need
the
a
nomination.
motion first,
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll motion.
okay?
I'll second.
And I hear second, okay. Can we do roll call?
Alden,
Yes.
Cloros,
Yes.
Heel,
Yes.
Calgin,
Yes.
Quint,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Approved unanimously, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And I will add that when this item's presented before council, the discussion here will be noted as one of the dialogue items, included in that packet, so council is aware that there was a discussion on it.
I appreciate that, thank you. And then it stays with you for discussion of the zero emission fleet transition plan.
If I may interrupt for a
Oh,
moment.
Mr. Calgin, yes.
I couldn't help but notice there's a member of the public that was trying to get in. And in the interest of the Brown Act, I thought that we should just make sure that door's unlocked. Is that, somebody go check that for us?
I'm pretty sure we can go check, but it's during regular business hours, so I believe it will be. But
Okay,
we'll
sweet.
verify.
Yeah, that means.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this next item, we're really excited to bring before you today. This item is a zero emission bus transition plan, the first one ever written for Petaluma Transit. this would be in line with the council goals previously outlined to try to be carbon neutral by 2030. So hopefully this plan will really get people excited and kind of present that vision going forward. But Ray, would you like to present on this one?
So let me get the PowerPoint working. Hopefully it works as smoothly as the last one. Yes, cool. I'm doing good at technology today. So this relates, I think, to our previous discussion about MV, because the MV drivers are going to be driving this, and so we have a lot of old buses that we want to replace with new buses to make, so they'll enjoy driving them, and also the public will enjoy riding in it. And so this is focused on transitioning our fleet, both the bus and paratransit fleet, to 100% local renewable powered operations. And this is an example of a hybrid bus, just before I continue to give you an example of what we currently have, and the future we'll have the zero emission buses going forward. So we know our direction, which I'll be covering in the next few slides, and then we know the benefits as well of this work, which most of you, the older members, have seen before, and then I'll bring the newer members up to speed as well. And then we have done enough planning as well with previous plans. And then we have funding to get started, and we need additional funding in the future as well. So the direction came from City Council back in 2021 from the City Climate Emergency Framework, which required to replace the diesel-powered buses and paratransit vans with greenhouse gas reducing vehicles by 2030. So 2030 is the most important date that we have for this project. There's also a state requirement, which it's by 2040, so it's a little bit further along than our city mandate, but I just wanted to bring it to speed on the state requirement. It's through the California Air Resources Board, or CARB. They passed Innovative Clean Transit ICT rule in 2018, and it requires all agencies throughout the state to convert to zero emission fleet. And that's by 2040, with this timeline you see here, which a little bit different from our timeline for the city, so it's less important for the city, but it's what the state requirement is. And this map here shows how basically every agency is on here. There's a lot of coordination throughout the whole state to make sure everybody is ordering the battery electric buses and other types of zero emission vehicles over the next several years. And part of that is, as the last bullet point shows, is continued operations to qualify for grant funding. So we're all coordinating together to make sure that we can do joint procurements, joint grant applications to get the process, keep going forward. And then another benefit is encouraging increased ridership in the future as a low carbon transportation choice, and reducing the greenhouse emissions, because the on-road emissions is the largest source for this county, as many of you are aware. And there's also potential life cycle cost savings as well with the transition. And this is some of the planning that's been done already. This is from 2019 with the battery electric bus planning and engineering study for our agency. And it focused on looking at whether the transit yard or on-route charging would be the best. And it was through that plan, we decided to focus on the transit yard. And looking at transit or with the charging equipment and management solutions as well. And also looks at the resiliency. So if the grid goes down, we have looking at solar and backup generators, different options for the future. And for the power, it's, as many of you know, it's 100% local renewable through the Evergreen program at PG&E. And so that's based through the geyser fields and solar. So that's pretty exciting that we have that offering in our county. We're starting to build now with the charging infrastructure. A big stepping stone for this was happened in the spring with the approval from PG&E to do the EV fleet program, which commits our city to purchasing battery electric buses and vans as well and dual port chargers for the transit yard, which this map here shows the red lines along the outer edge. I guess I can use my cursor, see if maybe it shows a little bit. So my cursor here along the outside edge shows the red lines where the charge with dual port charge will go, and then the buses and vans are in the existing parking lot here. And so that's how the future building will work with this project. And it requires operating the infrastructure for a minimum of 10 years as part of the contract with PG&E. Before I go into the details of how the conversion will happen, I just wanted to make you aware of the difference between the what PG&E is paying for and what the city is paying for. And so PG&E is paying for constructing, owning, and maintaining all the infrastructure to the meter, which is this transformer and panel. And then the city is paying for constructing, owning, and maintaining infrastructure behind the meter. And so that's more of what you see on the parking lot and with where all the buses are connecting to. That's the behind the meter part. The rest of the presentation is about showing what the current fleet looks like and how the conversion to the future is going to look like. And so I'll start with the cutaway fleet for paratransit. It's currently funded for gas vehicle replacement because that was what it was programmed in. We're looking at how to get better electric vehicles funded through that as well. It's about 2 times the cost. But that's the red area here highlighted that has what's currently funded. And then we have to look for funding as well for the 2019 vehicles. And so that's will be a future funding source to look at. The upcoming replacement is going to be 2024. It will be 3 vehicles. And a lot of these are estimate timelines, so it could change based on current funding levels, future funding we get. So just wanted to throw out a example of how we are hopeful to get funding in this approximate timeline. And then for 2025, additional 3 vehicles. So we'll have 4 remaining in the gas powered. And then 2026, we have additional vehicles again. And then full conversion by around 2028, maybe 2030, depending on how quickly we get funding. And then focusing on the fixed route fleet, currently we have the 7 vehicles funded for replacement. And then we have to find funding for the rest of the vehicles. So as I'm showing this, it's hopeful we'll get funding for all of them within the next few years, but we have to look for additional funding sources for this to meet the 2030 goal. So we're currently working on a 2024 purchase for 4 vehicles, and that is already funded. And then there's additional 5 vehicles they're looking at in 2026. And then you see this hybrid vehicles as well. So there's some hybrid that we already have, but we're getting those converted as well in the future. And then by 2030, all the vehicles we're planning on getting them to be fully electric within that timeline. And that is my presentation. The main thing I'm asking from TAC is to recommend for City Council to approve the resolution to adopt the plan because the state requires us to have this plan approved by City Council. And so that's the action item that we have before you. And if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Excuse me.
A couple
Mr.
of
Hall?
things I may add, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. So in creating this plan, generally, with the standard replacement City of Petaluma uses, federally, you can run a fixed route bus 12 years. We do 15 to get more years out of them. With a cutaway, it's generally 5 years. Federal life expectancy, we get 8. We did have to adjust that a bit because some of the older vehicles, the diesel electric hybrid buses we're running now, would have been replaced in 2033. So we created this given the guidance we've heard from council, the community, with things like the council goals and the climate action framework. And so we really wanted to advance that to make sure that it's reflective of being zero emission by 2030. And of course, it's a mandate from the state, the ICT, but it's a non-funded or only partially funded mandate. So there is an added cost associated with it. The vehicles cost more, as Ray noted. You have to do the infrastructure upgrades, which we're working on right now. So to add chargers costs money, to do grid upgrades at the facility costs money. All of those things are pretty significant. We've received a contingent of grants so far. So this first round of electric bus purchases that we'll be bringing before you in a couple months or so, we're working on the details of that now. Those are pretty much funded through a patchwork of different grants that we have. Everything from federal funds, the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Project, TIRCIP grants, through state funds, local funds. We really have a half dozen or more different funding sources associated with that, and we'll continue to try to do that going forward. But as of now, there is a piece of this, as noted in the plan, that has funding to be determined. So the vision's there, the goal's there, there will be additional funding beyond any we can receive, maximizing things like grants along those lines that we will have to work out a bit further down the line. But of course, this does set kind of the vision and that 2030 goal that we've heard about. And then it's also worth noting that, this plan, it doesn't really get into too much detail in terms of the type of vehicles themselves. We didn't want to be overly prescriptive on what type of bus, how big a bus. Of course, that's something else that we look at going forward as well. What is the right mix of vehicles? We did it within a framework of how they're defined generally in terms of the federal funding, fixed route paratransits, but that's something we'll continue looking at. And then also fleet expansion isn't something reflected in here. This is all purely based on current vehicles, current service levels, and generally pretty close service hours. If the city of Petaluma really wants to advance and do more service and require more vehicles, that's also a consideration. We would also make sure those are zero emission vehicles following a similar kind of approach and framework. But funding wise and things along those lines, that would also have to be considered. So just a few other points I want to add in.
I appreciate that. And for the benefit of the new members, the distinction between fixed route buses and cutaways, could you make sure the entire committee understands that?
Yeah. So we generally currently have two types of buses that we use. We have buses that are diesel or diesel electric hybrid that are 30 foot, 35 or 40 foot. And those are the buses that we generally use on fixed route service. So there are ones like routes 11, routes 2, where you can see the set schedule. You know exactly where all the stops are. You know the times it'll be stopping there. They're designed for, especially efficiency, for having, good flexibility in terms of how many people they can accommodate. They're able to handle loads, whether it's a handful of people up to running to the schools when they get out at Kenilworth Junior High School, for example, and may fill up with, 40, 50 kids on there. And then the other type that we currently have are paratransit vehicles, 22 to 24 feet, gasoline vehicles. Those are the white ones with the blue stripes on the side that you'll see, say, Petaluma Paratransit. And those are most commonly used on paratransit service, door to door, to where they're, a bit smaller, can really go on any street throughout the city because they may have to go to anyone's house to pick them up right at the front curb and go to any potential business, say a doctor's office, wherein it would be harder to get a bigger vehicle there. You could do that with a cutaway. Also making sure that there's good space for wheelchairs. Those generally can hold up to 3 wheelchairs. All the vehicles are ADA supportive. People with wheelchairs can ride any of those. But that's kind of the current composition of the fleet that we have.
Thank you. Now that we have someone in the audience, we're going to change a little bit how we handle any questions or comments. What I'd like to do is anybody who has questions now, clarifying questions, get those asked. Once we're through with those questions, we will open it to public comment. Hi there. And then we can come back and have any comments from this dais before voting if there are any comments. So any questions to clarify what you heard? Ms. Heel.
Just a curiosity, you mentioned a to be determined part, and I was just wondering if that there would be room in that for any of the micro transit possibilities that are proposed.
Yeah, I would say yes. Really, both the fleet we have now and then kind of the vehicles and the composition that I was referring to going forward. That's something that we're going to keep in mind is what services we would provide, not just now, but in future years, most notably things like microtransit service. We have generally those two types of vehicles now, but that composition may change somewhat if in launching that new type of service, a different type of vehicle that's different or maybe some sort of hybrid in between the two makes the most sense. I think both currently the fleet, we have flexibility, and especially going forward, we want to make sure we have the flexibility that we have a fleet that can do multiple things and can do everything and isn't precluded from doing any particular type of service.
Okay. Any further questions? Ms. Kohlroas?
Hi, thank you for that report. My question has to do with your planning new purchases in 2024. And can you just clarify for me, are they going to be all electric vehicles, or will they be hybrid vehicles? And if they're all electric, what is the current meter infrastructure for those purchases?
So I can start with the first question. It will all be electric, and that's moving forward for all vehicles. It's electric. The metering question, do you have the numbers offhand?
So right now, what we're doing concurrently, we're kind of working on two pieces. It'll be the fixed route bus procurements that you'll see in a couple months. We anticipate that'll have about a 10 to 12 month build time from when the order's set of building and taking delivery of those vehicles. Unfortunately, it takes a bit longer. It's not like going to a dealer and getting it off the lot with those type of vehicles. So while that piece is going on, we're also simultaneously working on yard infrastructure upgrades, as you saw a slide in the presentation there. That piece will take approximately, I would say, about 10 months from where we are now, ideally. There's a couple pieces that have long lead times in there, a couple of pieces of equipment to order. One thing called a piece of switchgear in particular that is fairly customized to design and build. A lot of agencies, what they've, in some cases, have had happen is they have the nice, shiny electric buses, but they're sitting there in the yard because they can't charge them. And in many cases, a piece that's delaying that is this piece of switchgear. So we're trying to order that and really start what's the longest lead time in that process. If one piece has to run ahead of the other, we'd rather have the yard upgrades done before the buses get here than the buses get here and we can't charge and then operate them. But overall, both are moving forward with fairly concurrent timeframes because we don't have the infrastructure right now at the facility to be able to support electric buses. Grid-wise, we could only charge about one vehicle, and we don't really have any chargers. We only have one charger for a Chevy Bolt. So as of now, even if we have the electric buses tomorrow, we don't have the infrastructure or chargers to charge them. But that will also be moving forward and presented here to the committee as well relatively soon.
Any other questions? Mr. Calgin.
Yeah, so dovetailing off of that, the infrastructure improvements you said will be handled by PG&E to the meter, is that right? So that'll all be...
Yes, they'll be doing what's referred to as to the meter, and the city is responsible for improvements from the meter.
And so that's what we're talking about here is funding for improvements behind the meter, yes?
Yeah, there's kind of two pieces. We've been working with PG&E through their EV fleet program, and we've been accepted into that. And so they, based on the application we have, the estimated vehicles and energy load, they will be doing upgrades in the form of a new transformer, which will sit on the corner of our property. And then they actually provide us with funding. Ray, did you want to talk about that a bit more?
So there's both funding for the buses and funding for the charging infrastructure. And so PG&E through that EV fleet program provides us with about, I think, $700,000 for purchasing the switchgear, possibly switchgear, and then the chargers and infrastructure related to charging the vehicles. And so we have funding, they're looking for all these different infrastructure items, buses, vans, the more cutaways, and then the charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of moving parts with funding that we're working on.
Okay, awesome.
So they do give us funding, fortunately, but ultimately that responsibility is on the city to purchase and install those items.
Okay.
Any other questions? Then I will open it up to public comment. And Mr. Peters, I think I did see you turn a card in. So, oh, you hadn't done it yet. I shouldn't have called on you. If you could identify yourself. At the very top, you can tilt it up. There you go.
Ben Peters, member of the public, member of the Climate Action Commission. So thank you for that. Big supporter of this. Two specific comments related to this plan. The first is sort of related to the in-route charging analysis and the focus of all of the charging happen at the bus depot. So concurrently, and this is mostly in the form of the Climate Action Commission, is the separate initiative, which is the city's sort of EV fleet make ready infrastructure program. And so my comment is that there should be a plan B or a backup plan for the use by the transit fleet for the other charging infrastructure that the city is planning to install. Because if there's a traffic accident or something and the bus depot can't go there, that there should be a plan for that. Based on my understanding of the current EV plan, that isn't a consideration. And so I encourage this committee to raise that, you know, there should be a plan for the buses to use the chargers at the fire stations and for at least some of those charging equipment to be upgraded, especially because the switchgear problem is a big one, I can tell you. You know, PG&E is taking way longer on everything. And so if we're considering something small at the fire station or you name one of those, you know, 10 locations, we should upgrade that facility now. You know, I'd also like to encourage us to consider a significant charger build out next to the main PG&E substation where the large battery farm is going to go, right? Because we're talking about possibly small batteries at the bus depot when we're having other private investors build a large battery farm, you know, out near Adobe Creek, right? And I could tell you, you can't fit the number of batteries you need at the bus depot, right? That place is tiny. I don't even know if you could fit a generator there, right? And so let's diversify our charging infrastructure. The second comment is related to the vehicle mix, and I think we have some time on this. My recollection from the 2019 purchase, and we didn't talk about the Altoona test, but I do think there are smaller vehicles that currently pass the Altoona test, which are electric, you know, available. And so my read of the report is that the current plan is to maintain the current mix, at least for the next purchase of the Parrot Transit vehicles, and I would like a consideration for possibly smaller vehicles. And so I think there's a lot of considerations there, which would be a great meeting topic, and look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. The Altoona test was mentioned there by Mr. Peters, appropriately so. Do you want to explain to the new members of the committee what the Altoona test is?
Sure. So it's a technical requirement from the FTA in order to be able to spend the funds that we get, which are FTA 5307 funds. There's a lot of requirements associated with that. And if we're going to purchase vehicles and be able to use those funds, it has to meet certain criteria. Criteria such as Build America, a certain amount of parts have to be made in the US, one of which is called Altoona testing. Basically, they want to make sure any bus purchased with those funds has been put through a rigorous testing at this university center in Pennsylvania called the Altoona Institute. And basically, they run buses through the ringer, you know, give them years of simulated impact wear to make sure they're all up to a certain standard of kind of build quality so that, you know, on a nationwide scale, those funds are being put to good use, you know, proper vehicles. That is something that can at times potentially be limited with the funding. You know, if you're using local funds, that's not a necessary requirement. But when you do federal funds, which is the majority of the funding we actually get towards these vehicles, that is a requirement. With some vehicles, there's a lot more options available right now, especially on the fixed route side for buses 30 feet and up. They have, you know, over a dozen or so vehicles that are Altoona tested, already improved. With ones that are electric cutaways, there's not as many options at this point. There's, you know, one or two that are on the market now. They often are done by third-party conversions, for example, kind of similar to the one that Smart is now running on their shuttle service. They just got an electric cutaway style vehicle. But that is something that is a large consideration in whatever vehicles we buy. Usually we do have to find one that is Altoona tested so we can make use of those federal funds. That is always being updated, changed, new vehicles added to it. We keep a close eye on it, but something that is one of the items that kind of limits what's available vehicle-wise.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think Mr. Peters raised some good points. What I would hope we end up with this evening is direction to staff to consider the things he raised today. Are there any comments before we vote on the emission plan? Mr. Postgate.
I just have two, I'm afraid. One is that I'm not clear on whether the city's EV plan, we've engaged a consultant, right, to advise us on building out. Is that done in concert with the transit EV stuff? I mean, is that already what am I trying to say, a unified plan?
Yeah. So we are working with that group currently, NB5. The same consultant that we've been working with in transit for about 4 months or so is the same one that was selected by the city maybe about 2 to 3 months ago that is leading the citywide planning efforts. So it's the same group, and they're knowledgeable about all sides of it, transit and all other parts of the city. As much as possible, they're trying to make it uniform with considerations, try to make it similar chargers that are compatible, things along those lines. I would say with transit, we're a bit fortunate that we had a bit of a head start with that 2019 study. We had a team that was hired through Sonoma Clean Power, and we worked with all the nearby bus transit agencies like Santa Rosa, Sonoma County on that. That helped outline some of the high-level needs that we have. And then when we got to the point we're at now, where we're working on the specific design for the site, picking the particular chargers, we made sure that we're working with the city in concert so it's holistic and all parts are kind of working together.
So, and my second thing, Dave, is that my wife has stopped driving, and none of these meetings had gone this late, and I've got to get a dog by 6 o'clock and leave like in 2 minutes here. And I apologize. I'll make different plans for next time.
Oh, wait.
I do support giving some direction to the staff to just review this with our consultants.
This has been a long meeting for which I apologize, but yes.
No.
Go collect your dog.
I should know. Yeah, right.
Thanks for being here. Any other comments? Then I will no. You're sure you're good? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to approve the zero emissions plan with direction to consider the comments made by Mr. Peters. Will somebody make that motion? Ms. Heel, thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Calgen, thank you. Roll call vote?
Alden,
Yes.
Colross.
Yes.
Heel,
Yes.
Calgen,
Yes.
Quint.
Yes.
Okay, I failed to mention this earlier. My apologies. One more agenda goof by me today. We normally have an item in here now called committee comment, which is open floor for committee members to offer whatever thought they might have pertinent to the transit committee. I know for the people who are new, you may not have any ideas yet, but I will open the floor, starting from my right, Ms. Colross. That's fine, I understood. Ms. Heel, okay. Mr. Quint. Mr. Calgen.
Yeah, I really like a lot of the stuff that we were talking about with with the electrification. It's very exciting, really cool, and I hope that we continue having these conversations throughout the decision-making process, because I think there's a lot of items that need to be addressed. Some of the stuff that Mr. Peters brought up is very interesting and things that we should talk about in the future. I'm just really excited to get the ball rolling, and then we can kind of talk more about that. The other thing that I wanted to address is, I don't remember if it was the last meeting or maybe the meeting before, but we talked about getting a walkshed analysis for our bus stops that was a network analysis and not a buffer analysis. And I was wondering if we had got anywhere on that, or if I needed to make a formal something or other.
Sorry, could you restate that? What type of analysis?
A walking network analysis, so not a buffer from, not a quarter mile. Yes?
I can look. I have it in the last meeting folder. I'll look it up and put it up on the screen.
Okay, yeah, I'd just love to see that. Or you can send it to me, whatever's easiest. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe in the last meeting packet, we had a couple of slides actually that did show the walk sheds, within a quarter mile of the bus stops. Is that correct, Ray? Am I remembering that?
I don't know if it actually ended up in the packet, but I know
haven't
we've
seen it.
saved it in the folder.
Okay.
Let me get that 1 second.
Yeah, we can look to verify. I believe that was an attachment in the last packet, but we'll send it around again just to be completely certain.
Okay, yeah, just because I know that I've seen the as a crow flies, and I wanted to make sure that we. Anyway, just thought I'd bring it
I
back
think
up.
Ray has it there. Are you able to share your screen?
I'm about to share my screen. I found it.
Let's do it.
Share screen. This is one approach to doing proximity to transit. I will say this is focused on high-frequency transit, which we don't have much high-frequency transit here. But as you can see, the less than 10-minute service area analysis here in darker color along Washington Street. And then you have 10 and 20 minutes in this range here. And this looks like it's mostly focused on the Smart Station, the original existing one. And then this map also shows low-income access. So anybody who lives in low-income neighborhoods looks at how many of those neighborhoods have access to high-frequency transit, which, as you see, like North McDowell doesn't have a high-frequency transit for low-income area. So this map shows a lot of critical information that is pertinent to access to transit.
Yeah, that's great. This is really good. I'd love to see it. No, that's fantastic. Can you send that to me?
Yeah,
That'd
I
be
can.
interesting. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions about this map before I stop sharing? Okay.
Okay.
Have you looked at housing density?
Hmm?
Have you looked at housing unit density in relation to that map?
You said density, level
Housing,
density?
housing unit density. So like how many actual people? Because that's just by areas, not by how many people actually have. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think that we're getting off track, and I think that
It's a good question.
whole other
though.
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I've got a list here, but I'll go through it quickly because I know the evening is running long. One, thrilled to see new members. We went through all of last year, one member short, and this time we actually turned applicants away. So thank you, all of you, for being willing to join, being part of this process. If I hear one complaint from past members, it's that there's a sense that this body is a rubber stamp, that too many decisions are made before they come to us. Probably one reason I pushed back a little bit on the 1 versus 2 year, just to change that pattern a little bit. Mr. Hall, I know you are fully booked with your time, but is it possible for you to send out an advance email to people about what things may be on an agenda, let's say 3 weeks in advance? So if people have questions, just find a way to give us a sense that we're more of the process before we actually get on the dais. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think we can discuss that some more. I'm open to any of those ideas. We'll kind of ruminate over it to see what we can do so that people, feel they have adequate notice of everything upcoming.
And a chance to weigh in before they get up here on the dais. So,
Yeah.
okay. When I first joined this committee, which was somewhere in the last ice age, the two things that are new and unique to transit you don't hear elsewhere are how bus systems work. The 30-minute loop you have to make, headways, all of that, and how funding works. And I still forget which one STA is and which one TDA is, but I know basically what they are. Would it be possible to have 1 or 2 workshops, given the new number of new members we have, to go through financing of bus systems in California and the physical realities of organizing a bus system, bus network? Meetings that wouldn't have to be any other agenda, just workshop to educate the new members.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Okay. On a similar topic, could we have a meeting that is a bus trip? Strikes me that with free fares, it's a public meeting. We just need to call out the location. And it would be good to go to a couple of transfer points, see how that works, see how the signs work. Not all of us ride the bus that frequently. I think it'd be valuable to experience it as a bus rider. So again, just an idea for the benefit of Mr. Hall. There are a lot of things changing in this community. Climate action is driving things. This is a year I would really like to make some progress in terms of what this committee, what this transit department might be in the future. Planning Commissioner Rakusen, in the most recent workshop where we talked about 15-minute neighborhoods, noted that we tend to talk about retail being the first step of a 15-minute neighborhood, a climate-friendly 15-minute neighborhood town. but that maybe it's transit instead. That maybe connecting the neighborhood cores with transit, just as the first door opens up, is a way to start building that climate-friendly future. So, that ties in with a lot of other long-term planning, but I want to get us in the framework of between now and a year from now, I would like to see a lot of progress toward a climate-friendly transit future. Two last things. Actually, one last thing. I heard that the HCPC has a ad hoc subcommittee to rewrite their organizing resolution. Good for them. We went through that process back in 2017. Again, I've been here since the last ice age. We agreed on a lot of things. I negotiated at length with the city manager on it. That resolution has never come forward. I was told it had been completed by legal, and yet we've never seen it. The biggest single change in that was changing these terms from 2 years to 4 years, because as I've mentioned earlier, there's a big learning curve to be up on this dais in transit, and we lose people after 2 years, which is just it's not helpful for institutional knowledge. Is it possible to research where that resolution ever went to? Is it possible to finally make progress on getting it toward the city council? Those are my thoughts. And Mr. Hall, I will then pass it to you for the transit manager report before we go home.
Thank you very much. So the transit manager's report is included in the packets. I'll try to see if there's any highlights. I think we touched on several of these. The electrification work continues. We're at the point now where we're hoping to finalize the switchgear and the chargers relatively soon, and then bring that to this group for discussion, considering kind of the trade-offs, all those type of things. We are doing a Fare Free program promotion for the summer youth program. Maria, would you like to talk about that and some of our efforts?
About the summer youth program?
Yeah,
It's been a great experience always to work with the other transit operators in promoting. It's really nice to have a unified message between each of us. So far, we haven't gotten a whole lot of feedback in terms of whether or not the riders or how that's been going, but it's been a nice process, definitely. Any other questions about it? Happy to answer.
Yes, we're fortunate to be working with the other transit agencies as part of that program. And then we are looking to have the first meeting of the microtransit ad hoc group in, I believe, first part of August or so. So you'll be hearing from us with the poll to figure out specific times, the members that are on that. And I believe that is it, unless there's any questions or other items. You can see in your packet, as always, some of the items listed for future agenda items. Of course, we can update that based on some of the feedback we've heard today to be reflective of those, but something that's also included in the packet every month as well. So.
Do we have a date when Fare Free service will begin?
We don't as of now. It's an item that's included in the FY24 budget, so it will be launching over that time, but there are a lot of considerations related to the Fare Free program, things like policy implications, how you are tracking ridership, if there's a mechanism that allows people to ride even if it's free. So those are some of the things we've been talking through for staff that we will be discussing, considering if we want to do an ad hoc group, things along those lines, because it is a pretty complex type of program, type of consideration. It's not the kind of thing you would want to just roll out overnight, because it can be so impactful to, the existing bus riders, most notably, to the bus drivers, to the new riders. You really want to make sure that you have all of your areas covered. You've made policy changes if needed. You've worked with police and other resources, like a team group.
Safe team.
Who may be resources who are a vital part of helping to enact that program and how we enforce it. So a lot more discussion to come on it, because there are several areas to consider. But within FY24, as we get closer and really nail down that timeline, we'll present it here.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hall? Hearing none, apparently we can adjourn at 5:59. We finished